Once the conflict had broken out, can we come to the issue? Putin warned quite early that if the West attempted to interfere, and we'll come to the question of what interference might look like in a moment, with his invasion of the Ukraine, that it would lead to consequences you've never seen. Now, that was widely taken to mean that he was alluding to nuclear capabilities and the possibility he might use them, and their nuclear forces were supposedly put on readiness, whatever that means. US intelligence in early February warned that Putin was planning a major nuclear weapons exercise that very month to intimidate NATO, but instead he invaded Ukraine. What do you think of Biden's response? In the sense, I can't help wondering, President Biden, I can't help wondering whether in fact it didn't work. You know, from Putin's point of view, we called their bluff. We said we'll use nukes, and immediately America made a plain, no, we're not putting troops on the ground, we're not going to get involved, we won't do no-fly zones. Did it have the desired effect? And does it, second, two big questions in one, does it raise the prospect that, as some people in this country are putting it, that cruelly it looks like the West is prepared to give Ukraine just enough to support the struggle on for as long as possible, very cruelly, without the prospect of victory at the end?
I think you are really onto something. I've just written an essay about this. It's not yet published, where I say that, I'm very sympathetic with President Biden and his team's desire to avoid a direct military confrontation between the United States, between a NATO country, and the Russians. But because of this strong desire this to avoid direct military confrontation, the impact has been that President Biden is incredibly risk averse in general. And this idea, I thought it was very revealing when President Biden tweeted out and he said that there would be no, U.S. The United States would not fight a war with Russia in Ukraine because that would end up being World War III. That idea that anything that the United States might do to escalate in any way beyond what we're doing would inevitably lead to World War III is just a myth. There's no evidence that supports that. But if you believe that and you internalize that, you self deter. And when we talk about in crisis management, um, that the country in a very serious, intense crisis, the country that is willing to escalate is the country that's going to pocket the gains. I mean, it seems obvious when you say it that way, but the effect of the way President Biden has responded to this is every time a Biden official comes out and says we're not going to provide real-time targeting, we're not going to provide ISR to the Ukrainians in this particular um, scenario because then the Russians might accuse us as being of co-belligerent. So we're not going to do it because that could be provocative. They say that, or they say we're not going to do a no-fly zone. We're not going to allow the Poles to send in their MiG fighter jets. We're not going to do all of these things. And every time they've done that, the Russians have not responded by de-escalating, which of course is the intent. The Russians respond by escalating. They increase the number of things they're willing to target. They increase the humanitarian suffering. They increase their nuclear saber rattling. They don't decrease their nuclear saber rattling. And so it's almost as if, not even almost, I do suspect, unfortunately, that the Biden administration's response to the Russian nuclear saber rattling really has confirmed exactly the assumptions that the Russians are operating on, which is that we are so terrified of the Russians crossing that nuclear threshold that it paralyzes us, um, to a degree that we don't do things that I think are perfectly reasonable and still at the lower levels of escalation where we could really truly be helping the Ukrainians, um, again, have this ultimate kind of strategic victory where they can cause so much, they can make it so difficult on the Russians that the Russians finally do look for an off ramp and some kind of solution. So I I yeah, I mean, I think that there's a concern that unless I always hold out hope for my government, they can turn things around. But unless they do turn things around, it sure seems like they aren't really willing to do what is necessary to allow the Zelensky government and Ukraine to defend themselves for as long as they have the will to do so.